I think it's time to check under the hood because the car Lincoln is driving is starting to sound like a clunker.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC. It's part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day. Whether you're watching the show on YouTube, wherever you're going to download the podcast, it's free. I appreciate your support. Thank you. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers, you can place a $5 bet. You're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So a few years ago on Fox's Big Noon Kickoff show, some of you might remember this. Urban Meyer, he was asked about, teams struggling, why they struggle. And he mentioned, he talked about the importance of when teams are struggling, you need to check under the hood, see what's going on. Sometimes it's not a flat tire, all right? It doesn't just need a paint job. You got to get inside. You got to get under the hood. See what's making that engine go or not start, whatever the case might be. And so he said, when you look under the hood, generally, there's three reasons why teams struggle. Number one, he said it comes down to making excuses. Let me read you this quote. So many of us are excuse makers. That's just part of who we are, and it shouldn't be that way. When you see a team struggle, the first thing that the fans and the media blame are the players, and then they blame the coaches. Never make excuses. When I was a coach, I would never let one of my coaches say, he's a bad player. I would warn him, say that again, and you'll probably have to leave. Because now you're just making excuses. Dig deep. Find out why. Every time that I had a team struggle, every time, it has fallen into one of three categories. Number one, there's some sort of trust issue. The player doesn't trust the coach, or the coach doesn't trust the players, or often when the players just don't trust each other. So let's examine that first thing that could be going wrong under the hood. What did he mean? Are we in a situation right now at a point at USC where the players aren't trusting each other, or even worse, where they're not trusting Coach Riley? Is it fair to say that, this is a players don't trust the coach situation? And think about it. There's so many players jumping into the transfer portal right now. Kind of makes sense. And I'm just spitballing here, kind of throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. But, since we're talking about making excuses, I've noticed Coach Riley, he's really adept at shifting the blame, to kind of player execution. Especially recently, he was asked about, his red zone play calling. And he'd bring up certain plays and how this would have been done and how that would have been done. He in essence, he said he was happy with the play calling, just not the results. Is this an excuse? Remember when Coach, this was more towards the beginning, towards the middle of the season, would say we're just one play away from being ... from being 3-0, 4-0, undefeated, whatever. Does that qualify for making excuses? Number two, second thing you're looking for under the hood. It's called a dysfunctional work environment where the expectations are really high, but we don't work hard. The coach has to be really clear with his team and realize that it's going to lead to frustration, anger, disappointment, because we want to win a championship. But I've got news, guys. We're not working hard. Your work ethic must exceed or equate your expectations, end quote. Now, I think this one's a little bit harder to find when you're looking under the hood, especially if you're in the media. It's kind of hard to quantify, or for me to question, is the effort there, especially since the media's practice access is limited? But are the players being held to the same standard? Look, when you're Pete Carroll and your team's in the middle of winning 34 games in a row, you can have guys like Lendale White pick and choose when he wants to practice. But when you're struggling to win games and you're losing games by one possession every week, guys with talent, those guys have to be locked in, and they can't be allowed to act the fool, goof around. Coach Riley has never hinted that the team isn't working hard. Quite the contrary. He loves coaching his team. They work hard. But look, for all of you guys out there, fans of the show, my everydayers, all of you who are going to become everydayers, because if you're watching on YouTube, click that red subscribe button, smash that thumbs up, click that bell notification button. All that's going to continue to help. Thank you very much. But for all of you who have said, hey, look, it's Coach Riley's team. He can close practice if he wants. You're right. It is his team. He can do what he wants. But right there is, I think, a really good reason to allow people like me, certain people in the media, to attend, to watch practice. That part of practice where we're talking about working hard, the effort. I'm not talking about the skip and stretch session. Nobody's working hard during that. Very few of them are going 100% during that time period. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe that's Coach Riley's way of protecting the players by not allowing the media to look under the hood, so to speak. And then the third issue, he said, is you've got a selfish team. Man, football is an unselfish sport. You've got to do the nasty. That means as a running back, you have to go protect your quarterback. You don't always get to run the ball. Sometimes you have to run down and cover the kickoff at 22 miles per hour, throw yourself into someone running the other way at 15 miles an hour. That's not fun. Why would you do that? Because you love your team and your teammates. So when you hear teams like LSU, Penn State, the Wolverines, USC, I'm interjecting that today, a few years later, struggling, stop with the talk about bad players. I get so sick of hearing that. It's not the players. I don't think it's the coaches, but there's something wrong. Lift the hood and find out one of those three things. End quote. So getting rid of Alex Grinch got the defense running more smoothly. Okay. But I do think the biggest problem, the biggest issue that needs repairing under the Trojans' hood right now is selfishness. NIL is making players who weren't selfish into call them selfish curious. They're testing the free agent market, putting their name into the transfer portal. I'm starting to hear from people close to the program, very close to the program, that there's a lot of green flowing through that locker room. I'm not necessarily talking about the NIL green. I'm talking about green with envy. Certain players are seeing other players getting playing time, and those players aren't producing. That type of stuff. So Coach Riley is right. He's absolutely right. I talked about this on yesterday's episode. We are changing from a college model to a professional model. But here's the difference. In the pro ranks, in the NFL, okay, there's guidelines, right? You have contracts. You've got buyout clauses, salary caps, salary limits, rookie contracts. I'll say this again. It's time to treat these semi-pros like professionals. I'm done treating them like some of you say, they're just kids. No, they're not. I get it. Chronologically, yes, they are. They're not playing kids' games anymore, especially if they want to be paid and act like a professional. You want to get paid? Great. I got zero issue with this. But right now, it seems pretty one-sided. The players recognize this, the parents, their handlers, they have the leverage. They get to ask what they want, when they want it, and if they don't like it, they can leave when they want. You can't do that in the professionals. You can't do that in the NFL. They've got rules in place. So the players are part of the problem under the hood right now, and they better understand that. If you want to be that engine that everybody wants to lift up under the hood and look at, you better be that Hemi. You better produce. Right now, USC's having a problem producing. And I think it's also starting to lead to their identity problem. We'll talk about that in the next segment. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, if you become a new customer and you can bet $5, you can get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and you can do everything now all in one place. Get a hunch? You want to check out the stats? Go to FanDuel.com. You need to check out some live play-by-play? Go to FanDuel.com. You got some extra coin in your pocket? Go to FanDuel.com, place another bet. Just visit FanDuel.com today. You're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I was talking about USC's situation recently with a dad of a Division I athlete, plays football, not at USC. I want to make that very clear. And I went to this particular individual. Excuse me. I wanted to get an outside perspective on why he thinks USC is struggling, or at least the perception that USC is struggling. Coach Lincoln Riley and the staff are struggling recruiting the California players. So we talked for, I don't know, about an hour and a half maybe. Really good conversation. Really enjoyed it. And we went down a bunch of different rabbit holes. But I think we both agreed that right now the biggest issue, the biggest problem at USC recruiting the California, I know I'm using the word kids, top prospects, is USC has an identity problem. Who are they? Who is USC today? Some of you might remember, I know my everydayers will, last year during the 2023 season, I asked Coach Riley after USC beat Arizona at home in the Coliseum. Remember that game? Yeah. Should have been that close, but it was. I said, what is USC's identity on offense? It wasn't clear. Well, the answer I got, that was the last question of the press conference. And as Coach Riley was rising out of his seat, he stopped. He answered the question. Well, we're the #1 scoring offense in the country. Okay, got it. Didn't answer the question, but he was making a point. Doesn't matter if I run the ball or pass the ball. As long as we're scoring points, we're okay. Maybe not. But today, what is USC's identity? I'm not talking about offense, defense necessarily. Because right now, it just kind of feels like USC doesn't know who they are, who they want to be. I know they want to be champions. I mean, that's the ultimate goal of every program. But it just kind of feels like it's a program filled with a bunch of guys from all over the country who like USC, but don't necessarily love USC, didn't grow up thinking about being a Trojan 24/7, 365. Where are those young men who used to come to USC on the weekends that played for those city section schools? What happened to the city section schools? The guys from the neighborhood. What happened to the guys that USC used to recruit, just ready to sign on the dotted line? The guys from Dorsey, from Crenshaw, from Taft. You want to go further back in the day? Manual Arts, literally down the street from USC on Vermont. What happened to the programs like Long Beach Poly? And I know Sarah in Gardena is a private school, but what's happened to Sarah? Carson, Banning. I can rattle off more programs. Dominguez. This is where USC used to go when they needed guys who cared about where they came from. Offensive linemen, defensive linemen, running backs with attitudes. That was USC's stomping grounds. The problem, here's where USC's problems start. It starts at the high school level, and it goes back to the culture that's being generated, that's being bred at the high school level. California right now has a culture problem. When I asked this specific parent, this question about why USC is struggling, the answer was interesting. He said, most of the good high school players, because we were talking about what happened to those city section schools, their talent's being drained. They're being recruited to go to programs like Bosco and Mater Dei. And if you're talking about public school programs, Mission Viejo to a lesser extent, Centennial in the Inland Empire. There are some programs that can still public schools that have a little bit of pull, but not nearly the pull or the sway or the incentives that programs like Mater Dei and Bosco and Servite or Olu, the Trinity League. These young men that end up going to those schools, they're essentially being recruited to play. They're being essentially paid to do it with a scholarship. Some get really nice living arrangements. Look, everybody knows the two best programs for athletics in the state are Mater Dei and Bosco. Those guys flip-flop on an annual basis. One of them is going to win the state championship in football. One of those two schools every year. It's been like that forever now. But neither one of those schools are actually situated in talent hotbeds. They have the best sports teams in the state, but they recruit those players. They treat these players like, I don't want to use the word prima donnas, but like they're the best thing since sliced bread. And I think when the best players believe that they're the best players, and some of them are, and they deserve, some of them actually just think they deserve top dollar. They're not worried about leaving the state or playing in other places. They already live away from home. So this has been going on. They've been doing it, but just on a smaller scale at the high school level. And it just translates really easily for them at the college level. Because look, that's all they know right now. And they think that's how it should be. This is what they were brought up on. So where is the loyalty? And I'm talking about just, where you grow up, wanting to go to the high school you go to, striving to go to your dream school in college, USC, UCLA. I don't even hear kids talk about UCLA anymore, let alone, USC, you can still hear their name in the mouths of high school football recruits. You don't hear about UCLA at all. My question is this dynamic the same in states like Texas and Florida? I'm sure there is to a certain extent, but not like this, right? Now, a lot of our conversation, it was off the record, so I can't go into the minutia, the details, and certain specifics. But USC needs to help itself. We both agreed on that. If you want to keep the California recruits home, here's one thing USC could do to help themselves. Have someone on the staff who understands the California players, that can relate to them. I mean, right now, I'm asking the question to my listeners, to my viewers. Name the coach on USC staff with that kind of presence. Which coach on USC's staff right now, whether it's an assistant coach, an analyst, a consultant, a GA, who has that kind of presence that can walk in, go to a high school, call up a kid, send them a text, play video games with them and say, look, I grew up in SoCal. I understand what it means to represent and want to go to USC. Let me tell you why you need to, why you don't want to go to Oregon or Ohio State or Alabama. That's what's hurting USC right now. So yeah, I would love it for Lincoln Riley to continue to establish and build those relationships in state. You don't need to go out of state all the time to go find those certain players. There are enough certain types of players in the state that should want to be at USC, playing for the Trojans, putting on the Cardinal and gold. And right now, it's really a mixed bag. It just feels like USC has to work harder to keep those players at home. And to me, that just doesn't make sense. It wasn't that too long ago when Jacoby Covington was yelling into my iPhone, "We a team now. We a team now." Remember the Holiday Bowl? Alex Grinch was gone. The defense finally felt like they were contributing to USC's winning ways. You know, they weren't riding the coattails of the offense anymore. They did something to win the game. Isn't it interesting? When you look at the transfer portal right now, I think USC's got 8, 9 players in there. I haven't checked in the last 10 minutes. But when you do check, is it just me or do you find this interesting? Most of the USC transfers are offensive players, guys who you would think want to be playing, being coached and developed by Lincoln Riley. Miller Moss, understandable. Quentin Joyner, Kyron Hudson, Duce Robinson, yep, he was the latest. Amos Talalele, offensive lineman, Mason Murphy. If you play wide receiver at USC, Lincoln Riley, Dennis Sims, why are you transferring? Why are you testing the transfer portal? Is it because there's too much talent? You're not getting enough game time reps? Let me get more specific. Why is Kyron Hudson testing the free agent market? Does he want more playing time? Does he feel he deserves more reps? Is he an NIL guy? Does he think he's undervalued at USC? I don't know. Was he politely asked to make room on the roster for a player who makes the easy passes, who catches the easy passes, who can block better on the outside? Not hating on Kyron Hudson, but I do find it interesting that he's testing the free agent market. And why is Duce Robinson, who put so much time, so much thought and effort into his decision to come to USC? Remember, 2-sport player. Got to be able to have the right fit to play baseball and football. What other programs are going to allow him to be a 2-sport athlete and not put up better numbers on the football field? That one caught me a little bit by surprise, but I'm starting to see a trend here. So far, Zachariah Branch, he's not in the transfer portal. So far, Jacoby Lane's not in the transfer portal for both of those players. But if one of those two decides to go, which one do you hope stays? Hit me up with your answer. I know which one I would prefer. I don't want to see either one leave, but I know which one I would prefer stay. One of those two, I have a feeling, is going to make their intentions known, but we'll see. Hopefully neither one. So my question with the wide receivers, because that's really what I'm focused on right now. Are those guys who are jumping in the transfer portal, do they feel they're not developing? Is this a Dennis Simmons issue, their position coach? It just seems curious to me that when USC's 2023 recruiting class, 2023, you brought in Makai Lemon, you brought in Duce Robinson, you brought in Jacoby Lane, you brought in Zachariah Branch. Everyone anticipated Zachariah and Duce to be the stars, the studs, to put up the big numbers. They're not. So is that part of the problem? Are there too many guys in that room? Do these guys want to be the number one somewhere else? Do they want to follow Miller Moss? Is he the guy? Are these guys going to go wherever he goes? Again, there's issues inside that locker room. I'm not saying that's the issue, but I find it curious. Lincoln Riley, offensive guru, quarterback genius. You get developed by him, you got a really good chance of winning the Heisman, or at least attending the ceremony. Wide receivers, they get a lot of attention in his offense. But when you've got theoretically 4 to 5 number one guys, at least in their minds, is that too many? Do you need to start making someone the number one? Start not so much forcing the ball. I don't think you need to go Lane Kiffin and ignore Robert Woods and make Marquise Lee the guy. Not that extreme. But you know what? Jacoby Lane, Duce Robinson, Zachariah, do they deserve all their reps? Are there guys on that team who might deserve more? All right, that's it for this episode. A lot going on. Everything's constantly moving, recruiting, fluid, transfer portal, Montezuma's revenge, up and down, fun, coming out the other way. You never know what's going on. But what we do know what's going to happen tomorrow, I'll be back with another episode of Locked on USC, because that's what we do every day, 5 times a week. And when you're done making Locked on USC your first listen every day, and you're done watching Locked on College Football, get over there to wearesc.com. I got some really good content up there. So does Scott Schrader on recruiting, Eric McKinney. He's got you covered every which way regarding the transfer portal. Chris Arledge, he put up his musings. Got a lot of good written content. So until that next episode, everyone, you know what to do.